Hello friends, in this video, I will tell you some interesting and at the same time scary stories about online dating. If you like the video, you can subscribe to the channel and like, thus help a lot in promoting the channel. In the year 2019 in the bustling city of Tokyo, a young man named Takumi found himself in dire need of money. He had been laid off from his job at a local factory, and despite his best efforts, he was struggling to make ends meet. It was then that he had an idea. Why not use a dating app to find a victim for a robbery? It seemed like the perfect plan. After all, who would suspect a handsome young man like Takumi of such a heinous crime? One evening, as Takumi was scrolling through the app, he came across a profile that caught his eye. It belonged to a beautiful young woman named Yuna, who was looking for someone to take her out for dinner. Takumi quickly messaged her, and to his surprise, Yuna responded almost immediately. They chatted for a while, and Takumi was pleased to discover that Yuna was both charming and intelligent. He couldn't believe his luck. Not only would he be able to rob her, but he might also get to spend some time with her as well. The night of their date arrived, and Takumi nervously awaited Yuna's arrival at his apartment. He had prepared a simple meal of pasta and salad, and he hoped that Yuna would be impressed by his cooking skills. When Yuna finally arrived, Takumi was struck by how stunning she looked. She was wearing a sleek black dress and high heels that made her legs look impossibly long. Takumi felt a pang of guilt as he realized that he was about to do something terrible to such a lovely person. They sat down to eat, and Takumi tried his best to make small talk. He asked Yuna about her job. She was a nurse, and her hobbies. She enjoyed reading and hiking. Yuna seemed friendly enough, but Takumi could tell that she was a bit guarded. He wondered if she had any inkling of what he was planning. After they finished their meal, Takumi led Yuna to his living room. He had planned to rob her there. But as he was about to make his move, Yuna suddenly turned and ran towards the balcony. Takumi lunged after her, but he was too late. Yuna had tripped and fallen over the railing. Takumi watched in horror as she plummeted towards the ground. He raced down the stairs and found Yuna lying motionless on the pavement. He checked for a pulse, but there was none. Takumi panicked, yet never intended to kill anyone. He quickly dragged Yuna's body back into his apartment, hoping to figure out what to do next. Days turned into weeks, and Yuna's relatives grew increasingly worried about her disappearance. They contacted the police, who launched an investigation. Takumi tried his best to act normal, but he was constantly on edge, afraid that he would be caught at any moment. Eventually, the police caught wind of Takumi's involvement in Yuna's disappearance. They raided his apartment and found Yuna's body hidden in a closet. Takumi was arrested and charged with murder. He spent the rest of his days behind bars, haunted by the memory of the beautiful woman he had killed in a moment of desperation. In the year 2020, in the vibrant city of London, a young woman named Emily was looking for love. She had tried everything to meet someone new, from going out to bars to asking friends to set her up on blind dates, but nothing seemed to work. So she turned to a dating app, hoping to find someone who would share her interests and her values. One day, she came across a man named David. He was charming and confident, and he seemed to have it all together. He told her he was a successful banker, and he showed her pictures of his luxurious lifestyle. Expensive cars, fancy dinners, and exotic vacations. Emily was impressed, and she felt like she had finally found someone who could give her the life she had always dreamed of. They arranged to meet in person at a cafe in the city centre. When Emily arrived, David was waiting for her. He was dressed impeccably, and he had a smile on his face that made her heart flutter. They chatted for a while, and Emily was impressed by David's intelligence and wit. He was the perfect gentleman, opening doors for her and paying for their drinks. After a while, David suggested that they go to his house to continue their conversation. Emily hesitated for a moment, but she was curious to see where he lived, so she agreed to go with him. As they walked through the streets of London, Emily noticed that David seemed to be leading her away from the city's centre. They passed through dark alleyways and deserted streets, and Emily began to feel uneasy. She asked David where they were going, but he just smiled and said it was a surprise. Finally, they arrived at an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. David led Emily inside, and she immediately felt a sense of dread. The place was filthy and dilapidated, and there was a strange smell in the air. David led her to a room on the upper floor, and as soon as they entered, he locked the door behind them. Emily tried to leave, but David was too strong. He attacked her, trying to force her into acts of violence. Emily fought back with all her might, but she was no match for him. In the struggle, she suffered a broken arm, but she was able to break free and call the police. The perpetrator was convicted and sentenced to a long prison term. Emily was left traumatized by the experience, but she was grateful to be alive. She had learned a valuable lesson, that not everyone is who they claim to be, and that it's important to be cautious when meeting strangers online. Over time, Emily healed from her injuries and found the strength to move on with her life. She went back to dating, but this time she was more careful. She made sure to meet people in public places, and she always told her friends where she was going and who she was meeting. Looking back on her experience, Emily knew that she had been lucky to survive. She had learned to trust her instincts and to be careful when meeting new people. But most importantly, she had learned that true love is worth waiting for, and that it's possible to find it even in the most unexpected places. In the year 2019, in the bustling city of New York, there lived a man named Jack. He was a successful investor and had his own profitable business. Jack was always driven by his ambition and had an insatiable hunger for success. However, he felt that something was missing in his life. Jack craved the attention of the opposite sex, and he longed for a companion who would share his success and his dreams. One day, Jack decided to take matters into his own hands. He downloaded a dating app on his phone and began swiping through profiles of beautiful women. After a few weeks of flirting and chatting, Jack finally arranged a date with a woman he had met on the app. They decided to meet at a hotel, where Jack had booked a luxurious room for the occasion. On the day of the date, Jack woke up with a feeling of excitement and nervousness. He spent hours getting ready, choosing the perfect outfit, and making sure that everything was just right. When he arrived at the hotel, his joy was unlimited. He felt that he had finally found the woman of his dreams, and he was ready to give her the world. As Jack entered the room, he was greeted by a beautiful woman who looked just like her profile picture. They started talking, and Jack felt that he had finally found someone who understood him. However, his joy was short-lived. Suddenly, two men burst into the room, brandishing weapons and demanding money. Jack was caught off guard and tried to defend himself. But he was no match for the attackers. They beat him mercilessly, leaving him with multiple bruises and injuries. They also took his wallet, his documents, and all of his valuable possessions. Jack was left alone, helpless, and in pain. When he finally came to his senses, Jack immediately called the police. He told them everything that had happened, and they promised to do everything in their power to catch the culprits. The police launched a full investigation, and after a few days, they managed to apprehend the attackers. The two robbers were brought to trial, and they were found guilty of their crimes. They were sentenced to several years in prison, and Jack finally felt that he had received justice. However, he was left with a deep sense of regret and shame. He realized that he had put himself in danger by trusting strangers on the internet, and he had paid a heavy price for his mistake. Jack learned a valuable lesson from his ordeal. He realized that true happiness and fulfillment could not be found in material possessions or fleeting relationships. He started to focus on his own personal growth, and he worked hard to become a better person. He learned to value his own worth, and he stopped looking for validation from others. In the end, Jack emerged from his ordeal stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. He had faced his fears and overcome them, and he had learned to live his life on his own terms. Jack realized that he didn't need anyone else to make him happy, and he finally found the peace and contentment that he had been searching for all along. In the year 2018, in the bustling city of Sydney, Australia, a young woman named Emily was looking for love. She had tried the usual methods of meeting people, but nothing seemed to work out. That was when she decided to try her luck with the dating app. After a few swipes, Emily matched with a man named Jack. He seemed charming, with a warm smile and a twinkle in his eye. They messaged back and forth for a while, and Jack asked Emily out on a date. She eagerly accepted, hoping that this would be the start of something special. On the night of their date, Jack invited Emily to his home for dinner. She was a little hesitant at first, but Jack seemed so sweet and genuine that she decided to go for it. When she arrived at Jack's house, he greeted her warmly and invited her in. The table was set beautifully, and Jack had prepared a delicious meal. But as the night went on, Jack's demeanor changed. He became agitated and started demanding money from Emily. She was shocked and scared, not knowing what was happening. Suddenly, Jack lunged at her and started beating her. Emily tried to fight back, but she was no match for Jack's strength. Terrified and desperate, Emily handed over all her valuables to Jack, hoping that it would satisfy him. But it wasn't enough. Jack continued to demand more money, and Emily realized that she needed to escape before things got any worse. With all her courage, Emily managed to break free from Jack's grasp and ran out of the house as fast as she could. She didn't stop running until she found a safe place and called the police. When the police arrived, they found Emily shaken and bruised, but thankfully alive. They quickly arrested Jack and brought him to trial for his crimes. It was discovered that Jack had been using the dating app to lure women in and then rob them. Emily was just one of many victims. After a long and grueling trial, Jack was found guilty and sentenced to a lengthy prison term. Emily, though still traumatized by the experience, was grateful for the support of her friends and family, as well as the justice system that had worked to bring Jack to justice. In the end, Emily learned a valuable lesson about trusting strangers and being cautious when it comes to matters of the heart. She vowed never to let her guard down again and to always prioritize her safety above all else. In the year 2020, in the bustling city of London, a man named Jack decided to try his luck on a popular dating app. He was tired of the same monotonous routine of work and wanted to find someone special to spend his life with. It was on this app that he met a beautiful girl named Emma. They chatted for a while, and Jack was smitten by her wit and charm. After a few days of chatting, Emma invited Jack to her hotel room for a drink. Jack, excited about this new prospect, quickly agreed. As Jack arrived at the hotel, Emma greeted him with a warm smile and welcomed him inside. She offered him a drink, which Jack gladly accepted. Little did Jack know that this was going to be the biggest mistake of his life. As he sipped on his drink, he began to feel dizzy and disoriented. Emma had slipped something into his drink, and Jack was completely unaware of it. Jack collapsed on the floor, barely conscious, and Emma quickly made her way out of the hotel room, leaving him for dead. A few hours later, Jack was found by the hotel staff and rushed to the hospital. He was miraculously saved, but his condition was critical. As Jack lay in the hospital, he began to realize that he had been robbed of all his possessions. His wallet, phone, and other valuables were missing, and he felt violated and helpless. The police were called, and an investigation was launched. The investigation led to the arrest of Emma and her accomplices, who were charged with attempted murder and robbery. The trial was long and grueling, and Jack had to relive the traumatic experience in court. However, justice was served and Emma and her accomplices were found guilty. Through this traumatic experience, Jack learned a valuable lesson about online dating and the dangers of trusting strangers. He vowed to be more careful in the future and to never let his guard down again. The story of Jack and Emma is a cautionary tale about the perils of online dating. While it may seem exciting and promising, it is essential to exercise caution and be mindful of the potential risks involved. This story serves as a reminder that one must always be vigilant and careful, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. In 2019, in the bustling city of Shanghai, China, the streets were filled with people going about their business. The city was full of energy, people bustling in the streets and filling the air with conversation. But for one woman, the excitement of the city could have turned into a nightmare. It started innocently enough. A woman had been chatting with a man on a dating app for weeks, and he finally convinced her to meet him for a date. He offered to go to a hotel in town, and the woman agreed, excited about the opportunity to meet someone new. When she arrived at the hotel, however, she quickly realized that something was wrong. The man she was talking to was there along with several other men she didn't recognize. The atmosphere was tense, and the woman immediately felt uncomfortable. Once she realized the situation was dangerous, she tried to leave, but the men had other plans. They cornered her, trying to pressure her and commit acts of violence against her. The woman resisted as best she could, but she was outmatched and overpowered. She was beaten, raped, and left for dead. The next few days were filled with pain and fear for the woman. She was rushed to a hospital, where she slipped into a coma. Despite the doctor's best efforts, she never woke up. A few days later, she died, leaving her family and friends in deep despair. The case made headlines around the world as people were horrified by the brutal and senseless crime. The police launched an investigation, and eventually the perpetrators were caught and brought to justice. But for the woman's loved ones, the damage had already been done. They were left grieving for the interrupted life and wondering what could have been done to prevent such a tragedy. The story of this woman's fate is a vivid reminder of the dangers that lurk in the world of online dating. It is a cautionary tale that serves as a warning to all who use dating apps or meet people online. In the end, this woman's death was a senseless and tragic loss. But we can honor her memory by being vigilant and staying safe in the world around us. In the year 2022, in the bustling city of New York, John was feeling lonely. He had been single for a while and was looking for someone to share his life with. He turned to a popular dating app, hoping to find someone special. That's when he came across Sarah's profile. She was beautiful, smart, and seemed like the perfect match for him. They hit it off right away, chatting for hours on end every day. They talked about their interests, their dreams, and their past experiences. After a few weeks of chatting, John decided to take the next step and invite Sarah over for dinner. He wanted to impress her, so he spent hours cooking a gourmet meal and setting the table with candles and flowers. When Sarah arrived, she was blown away by the effort he had put into the evening. As they ate, John offered Sarah a drink. She accepted, and soon after, she started feeling dizzy and lost consciousness. When she woke up, she was in a strange room, tied up and scared. John and his accomplices had kidnapped Sarah, hoping to get a ransom from her family. They threatened to kill her if they didn't get the money they wanted. Sarah was terrified and didn't know what to do. Days went by, and the kidnappers' inexperience started to show. They didn't know how to handle the situation, and they were making mistakes left and right. One day, the police received a tip from a concerned neighbor who had seen suspicious activity in John's house. The police raided the house and arrested John and his accomplices. Sarah was rescued, and she was taken to the hospital to be treated for her injuries. She was traumatized by the experience, but she was grateful to be alive. John and his accomplices were charged with kidnapping, and they were sentenced to years in prison. Sarah was able to move on with her life, but she was always wary of meeting new people online. She learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of trusting strangers, and she promised herself that she would always be careful in the future. In conclusion, the story of John and Sarah serves as a warning to anyone who uses dating apps or meets people online. It's important to be careful and cautious, and to never let your guard down. You never know who you're really talking to or what their true intentions are. Always put your safety first, and trust your instincts. In 2017, in the romantic city of Paris, a young man named David arrived for a date with a woman he had met online. David was excited and nervous about meeting his virtual crush in person. They had exchanged countless messages and phone calls over the past few months, and he felt like he had known her forever. As he arrived at the agreed-upon hotel, he spotted her standing outside. She was even more beautiful in person than in her pictures, and David felt his heart skip a beat. However, things quickly took a dark turn. The moment he entered the hotel room, the woman pulled out a gun and demanded his documents and money. David was in shock and didn't know what to do. He couldn't believe that the woman he had been talking to for months could do something like this. As he hesitated, the woman became more agitated and fired the gun multiple times, hitting David in the chest and stomach. David's life was hanging in the balance as he was rushed to the hospital. Despite the doctor's best efforts, he succumbed to his injuries and passed away. It was a senseless tragedy, and everyone who knew David was in shock and mourning. The police immediately launched an investigation and were able to track down the woman, whose name was Claire. She was a known criminal with a long rap sheet and had been involved in several similar crimes. Claire and her accomplices were arrested, and the trial was quick, given the overwhelming evidence against them. Claire was sentenced to life in prison for David's murder, and her accomplices received lengthy sentences as well. However, David's family and friends were still reeling from the loss of such a young, promising life. They couldn't understand why someone would take another person's life for something as trivial as money and documents. Over time, David's memory became a rallying cry for justice and awareness of the dangers of online dating. His family started a foundation in his name that provided resources and support for victims of violent crimes. The foundation also worked to educate people about the risks of online dating and how to stay safe. In the end, David's tragic death was not in vain. It sparked a movement that aimed to make the world a safer place for everyone. Even though he was gone too soon, his legacy lived on in the countless lives that were touched by his story. In the year 2016, in the bustling city of Tokyo, a man named Kenji sat alone in his small apartment scrolling through his dating app. He had been single for far too long and was eager to find someone to spend time with. As he swiped through the various profiles, he came across one that caught his eye. The woman was beautiful, with long black hair and sparkling brown eyes. Her name was Yuka, and she lived only a few miles away from Kenji's apartment. Excited at the prospect of finally meeting someone new, Kenji sent Yuka a message. They chatted back and forth for a few days, getting to know each other and exchanging photos. Kenji was thrilled when Yuka agreed to meet him at her home. On the day of the date, Kenji got dressed in his best clothes and made his way to Yuka's house. As he walked up to the front door, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He had never met anyone from a dating app before, and he didn't know what to expect. But when he walked into Yuka's house, he was surprised to see several people waiting for him. They were all dressed in black, with their faces obscured by masks. Kenji felt a knot form in his stomach as he realized that something was wrong. Before he could react, the group of people attacked him. They pinned him to the ground and began to rummage through his pockets, looking for his wallet and phone. Kenji fought back, but there were too many of them. As the struggle continued, Kenji felt a sharp pain in his chest. One of the attackers had pulled out a knife and stabbed him several times. He knew that he was in serious trouble. As the group fled the scene, leaving Kenji lying on the floor bleeding out, Yuka emerged from the shadows. Kenji was shocked to see her there, and he realized that she must have been involved in the attack. Kenji's body was found by a passerby a few hours later. He had bled out on the floor of Yuka's home, alone and scared. The police were able to track down all of the perpetrators of the attack, including Yuka. They were all brought to trial and sentenced to long prison terms for their roles in the crime. But for Kenji's family and friends, it was too little too late. They were left to grieve for the kind, gentle man who had been taken from them far too soon. In the end, the tragedy of Kenji's death served as a warning to others. It reminded people to be careful when meeting strangers online, and to never let their guard down. And for Kenji, his memory would live on as a cautionary tale, a reminder that the world can be a dangerous place. In the year 2017, in the bustling city of Los Angeles, the sun shone down on the palm trees as people hurriedly walked down the streets. It was a warm day, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry to reach their destination. But one woman had something else planned for the day. Her name was Samantha, and she was a con artist. She had been using fake profiles on dating apps to lure unsuspecting men into her trap. Once they arrived at the designated place, she would have her accomplices attack them and steal everything they had. Samantha was a master of disguise, and she could switch between personalities with ease. On this particular day, Samantha had set her sights on a man named David. He was a successful businessman who had just moved to Los Angeles from New York. Samantha had carefully crafted a fake profile on the dating app, using all the right words and images to entice David. He was smitten and couldn't believe his luck when Samantha agreed to meet him at a hotel in the heart of the city. David arrived at the hotel, eager to meet the woman he had been chatting with for weeks. He had brought with him a bottle of champagne and some flowers, hoping to impress her. As he made his way to the room, he felt a little nervous, but also excited. Little did he know that his life was about to change forever. As David knocked on the door, he heard someone shuffling inside. The door opened, and there stood Samantha, looking even more beautiful than her pictures. David was taken aback, and his nerves melted away. He stepped inside the room, and Samantha closed the door behind him. Suddenly, the bathroom door swung open, and two men appeared. They were big and muscular, and David could see the anger in their eyes. Before he could react, they pounced on him, punching and kicking him mercilessly. David tried to fight back, but he was outnumbered and outmatched. He could feel his strength leaving him as the men continued to beat him. Samantha watched the scene unfold with a cold detachment. She knew that she had to make a quick escape before the police arrived. She quickly searched David's pockets, taking everything of value, including his phone and wallet. Then she slipped out of the room and disappeared into the crowded streets. When the police arrived, they found David lying on the floor, bleeding and unconscious. They rushed him to the hospital, where he was treated for his injuries. The doctors said that he was lucky to be alive, but that he would have to undergo extensive therapy to recover fully. The police launched an investigation into the attack, but they couldn't find any leads. Samantha had covered her tracks well, and David was unable to identify her. It seemed as though she had gotten away with her crime. Months passed, and David slowly recovered from his injuries. He had nightmares about the attack and was afraid to go out alone. He felt violated and angry, and he couldn't understand why someone would do this to him. But one day, as he was walking down the street, he saw someone who looked familiar. It was Samantha, and she was walking with a man who looked like one of the attackers. David felt a surge of anger and fear, and he knew that he had to act fast. He called the police and told them what he had seen. They quickly arrived on the scene and arrested Samantha and her accomplices. The evidence was overwhelming, and they were all sentenced to long prison terms. David finally felt a sense of closure and justice. He knew that he would never forget what had happened to him, but he also knew that he had overcome it. He vowed never to let anyone take advantage of him again and to live his life. In the year of 2014, in the bustling city of Singapore, Sue Lin, a young and ambitious woman, was excited about a date she had arranged through a popular dating app. She had been single for a while and was eager to meet someone new. Little did she know this date would change her life forever. Sue Lin arrived at the hotel, a luxurious place in the heart of the city. She nervously made her way to the room, where she was greeted by a man who seemed charming and friendly. They had a drink, chatted for a while, and things seemed to be going well. But then suddenly, the man's demeanor changed. He became aggressive and violent, and before Sue Lin knew it, she was being brutally beaten and robbed. She lay on the floor, bruised and bleeding, as her attacker fled the scene. Sue Lin was rushed to the hospital, where she received treatment for her injuries. The attack had left her traumatized and shaken, unable to trust anyone again. The police were notified, and an investigation was launched into the incident. It soon became apparent that Sue Lin was not the only victim of this heinous crime. The police discovered several other cases of women who had been lured to hotel rooms through dating apps and subjected to similar attacks. The perpetrators were a group of ruthless criminals who had been using this method to rob and rape women. The investigation into the case intensified, and the police were able to apprehend the suspects. The group was made up of 4 men, all in their mid-20s, who had been operating the city for several months. They had carefully planned each attack, using fake profiles on dating apps to lure women to hotel rooms, where they would pounce on them and rob them of their valuables. The trial of the 4 men was a long and grueling process, as the victims recounted their horrific experiences. Sue Lin was one of the bravest, as she faced her attackers in court and testified against them. It was a traumatic experience, but she was determined to see justice served. After a lengthy trial, the 4 men were found guilty and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Sue Lin was relieved that they would be behind bars and unable to harm anyone else. She began to heal from her trauma, slowly but surely, with the help of therapy and support from loved ones. The incident had a profound impact on Sue Lin's life, but it also served as a wake-up call for the city of Singapore. Dating apps were scrutinized and security measures were tightened to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. Sue Lin became an advocate for women's safety, speaking out about her experience and raising awareness about the dangers of online dating. In the end, Sue Lin emerged from the experience as a strong and resilient woman, determined to use her voice to make a difference. The incident had been a dark chapter in her life, but she had managed to turn it into something positive, inspiring others to speak out and stand up for their rights. My opinion: all of these stories are really quite scary, especially when you consider that they all happened in reality. Many of them involve either a girl or a man agreeing to meet at the home of a man they have never seen in the eyes. I think the criminals are good at gaining confidence through correspondence, but in any case it is better to meet in a park or in a cafe, and in no case go straight to the house. Otherwise, you have a good chance of getting into my next view. Thank you for watching.